Last week, Konami revealed the full lineup of the Contra collection, so we finally know the other 4 mystery games that have been revealed. I did do a review on the Konami Arcade Classics collection and the Castlevania collection already. You can click right up there if you want to check those out. They both had their pros and cons, but I kind of feel like the Contra collection is going to be the same thing. My reaction to the list of the Contra games was more like, what? Why? I understand their selection's going to be a little more limited, because arguably Contra is nowhere near as large of a catalog as something like Castlevania or a random Arcade Classics collection, so there's less games to pick from. And based on the other 2 collections, we've already seen they're trying to keep that $20 price point, so that really limits them to like NES and Game Boy and 16-bit. Everything beyond that is off limits pretty much. And this time around there's only 7 new games compared to 8. Yes, if you look at the full list, you'll count 10 games, but rest assured, 3 of those are in fact not new games. They are just reskins of games that are already in the collection. It's a decent set of games. I'm not going to argue that they're not going to be fun to play, but it's very redundant. The original that started it all, Contra the arcade game. This game's a classic, but like most arcades at the time, it is really short. If you're familiar enough with this one, you can really beat it in like 15 minutes without too many issues. Still a great game, and we're also getting the NES version of that game. Now, this one I don't consider a repeat. I usually love arcade versions of games, but in the case of Contra, I still think the NES version is the better one of the 2. It feels and it looks different enough to be considered a different game. But here's where the repetition begins. Not only do we have Contra NES, Contra for the Famicom is also included. For those that don't know, that's basically the NES in Japan. And this version really is mostly the same game. There's some minor differences, sure. Some graphical enhancements, it's a little easier, and there's actually some story cutscenes thrown in, but yeah, it's the same game. Another arcade, Super Contra, is in the mix, and just like the first game, it's classic, but very short. And just like the original Contra, the NES version of Super Contra, Super C, is in the collection. And I feel the same way about it that I do about the NES Contra. It's the better version of the game, and different enough to be considered a different game. Fine. Moving on to the Super Nintendo, and one of the best Contra games in the entire series, Contra 3 The Alien Wars. This was a no-brainer for the Contra collection. It had to be in here. It's a game I've beaten countless times and will never be tired of. But here we go with another repeat. Super Probotector, Alien Rebels. If you're not familiar with Probotector, it's just a reskin of Contra. Back in the day, the term Contra was a little controversial in certain parts of the world. Details I won't really get into here, but this caused the European versions of the series to be renamed Probotector. And instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone-inspired soldiers as the main heroes of the series, they were turned into robots. That's it. The exact same game with robots instead of human soldiers. Honestly, who cares about Probotector? It's not even real Contra. I'm so confused as to why this is part of the collection. Okay, cool, make it so you could play different regions of the game, but adding it as a separate game taking up a slot in the collection? I guess if you want to play a censored version of Contra, sure. I'm glad to say that Contra Hardcore is in the collection too. This is my favorite Contra game of all time. It can be brutally difficult, and it's got that Sega feel to it. That Sega feel that you can't quite explain. The soundtrack rocks, and it's another must-have in any Contra collection. But here's another repeat. We're also getting Probotector. Same game, but the version with the robot reskins. Taking up another slot in the collection. Which is funny because there already was a robot character in the game called Brownie. Now you can play as all robots all over again. And the final game in the collection is Operation C. This one I like. I recently streamed it. It's a lot of fun. It's Contra on the Game Boy, an original game, not a port. It feels like Contra, it looks like Contra, it plays like Contra. Overall, the Contra collection does have some fun games in it. I'm going to get it just to replay them again on a modern console, sure. But is it really worth $20? I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind after I get my own hands on it. But it does seem like they just wanted to do the absolute easiest collection. Grab a couple NES games, grab a couple Game Boy games, and then slap some variations in there to get credit for having multiple games. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I understand it's a smaller library to pick from, but there's other things they could have done. And I know in the comments people are going to say they wanted Contra Rebirth, like I did. However, you have to look at the other collections. The Konami Arcade Classics one didn't have Gradius Rebirth. Castlevania didn't have Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth, so it's just not going to happen. Rebirth is not going to be part of these sets. Here's a suggestion. Instead of throwing Probotector in the collection, why not have Contra Force instead? Sure, Contra Force kinda sucks, and it's got a really shitty frame rate, but at least it's a different game, it's not just a reskin. If they had done that, and you know what? Let's go ahead and stop right there. Let's increase the collection another $10, up to $30, and include Contra 4. I would have paid $30 to have that as part of the collection. And I understand it's a DS game with 2 screens, however, that shouldn't stop it from being on console. If you've played Castlevania Mirror of Fate, you know that was exclusive to the 3DS, and that was still translated over the PS3 and 360 just fine. But you see what I mean about Konami wanting to take the easiest way out. That would have meant a better collection, but that would have required more work on their part. It just all feels kind of like a quick cash grab. But now you really just have a collection of a couple good games and a bunch of reskins. It's nothing special. And they are adding the Japanese version of some of these games into the collection later as part of a free update. But again, it's just different versions of the same game. It's going to be $20 like the other 2 collections. It's coming out sometime this summer. There's no official release date yet. But I'll definitely play through the whole thing, and I will report back the details to you on how I feel about the finished product. As of right now, I'm not impressed at all. Leave me your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button with all of your strength. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any new content. You can follow me on social media or go into my community tab for updates. And for as little as $1 a month, you can support the channel directly on Patreon. This is Fabian, I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.